When Sophie Cunningham stepped up to the mic, you could feel it. Not just the tension in the room, but something deeper, something heavy. Her voice didn't crack right away, but her eyes gave it away. Everyone could sense it. This wasn't going to be a normal press conference. Not for the Indiana Fever, not for the WNBA, and definitely not for Caitlin Clark. Right beside her stood Lexie Hull, hands clasped, trying to keep it together. Stephanie White, usually the steady voice of leadership, looked like she had aged 10 years overnight. This wasn't just a statement about an injury. It was something much more human, much more real. Caitlin Clark, rookie phenom, league changer, walking headline, was stepping back.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
And suddenly, everyone realized we had all been watching a storm form, and now it had finally hit. Let's rewind for a second. Caitlin Clark's rookie season was already the stuff of legend. From the moment she put on that Fever jersey, she was a walking spark plug. Every arena she played in was packed. Ratings soared. Jerseys sold out. And the WNBA? It went from niche interest to must-watch TV. She was that impactful. But what nobody saw, or maybe chose not to see, was the cost. The long flights. The brutal back-to-backs. The endless media pressure. The expectation to perform like a machine, game after game, on a body that was barely out of college and had never faced this kind of schedule. And somewhere along the line, it all started to catch up to her. According to what Sophie, Lexie, and Stephanie shared in the press conference, Caitlin had been playing through pain for weeks. A groin injury, nagging, persistent, and increasingly unbearable, wasn't just slowing her down. It was breaking her down. But here's the kicker. She didn't tell anyone. Not at first. Because that's who Caitlin Clark is. Fierce. Focused. Maybe even a little stubborn. She didn't want to let the fans down. Didn't want to let her team down. And more than anything, she didn't want to admit that she needed rest. The reality, though, was brutal. By the time the All-Star break rolled around, she was running on fumes. And yet, she still tried to suit up. Still tried to smile for the cameras. Still tried to carry the weight of being the face of the league, even if her body was screaming at her to stop. So when the announcement came that she was withdrawing from the All-Star game, fans were confused, shocked, some even angry. But in that press conference, everything changed. Sophie Cunningham, who had become more than just a teammate, more like a big sister, was the first to speak. And she didn't sugarcoat it. Caitlin's been pushing through pain that would sideline most players, she said. We've tried to convince her to rest, but she kept saying she didn't want to disappoint anyone. You could see Lexie Hull nodding through tears. Because for her, this wasn't just about basketball either. Just days before Caitlin made her decision to step back, Lexie had suffered a personal loss of her own. The sudden passing of her dog, who she'd raised since college. And in the middle of her grief, it was Caitlin who comforted her, who sat with her, who texted her late at night to check in. So when Caitlin finally admitted she couldn't keep going at full speed, Lexie broke. It wasn't just about a groin injury, Lexie said softly, barely holding her composure. It was about everything she's been carrying. The pressure, the expectations, the nonstop noise. And she did it all with a smile. We owed it to her to be honest, even when she couldn't be. Then Stephanie White stepped forward, and what she said next stunned the room. We failed to protect our players, she admitted. Not just Caitlin. All of them. The schedule, the lack of recovery time, the media demands, it's too much. And if the league doesn't make changes, we'll keep seeing this happen. Our stars won't last. For a coach to say that, on record, was monumental, but also told us something deeper. This wasn't about ego. This was about family. Because that's what the Indiana Fever have quietly built in the background of all the headlines and highlight reels. A team that's bonded not just by basketball, but by something more powerful. And at the center of that bond, Caitlin, Lexie, and Sophie. Or, as fans have now dubbed them, Trees Leches. A name that started as a joke. Three sweet, bold, and completely different personalities who somehow clicked. It started with funny Instagram captions and locker room selfies. But it grew into something real. These weren't just teammates. These were sisters. Sophie, the fiery vet with a protective streak a mile wide. Lexie, the soft-spoken but unshakable heart of the locker room. Caitlin, the rising star who never asked to carry the league on her back, but did it anyway. And when Caitlin finally cracked, they held her up. That's what this press conference was really about. Not injury reports or game day decisions. It was about saying we see her, we hear her, and we love her enough to tell her it's okay to rest. It was about changing the culture. Because for too long, female athletes have been told to tough it out, to smile through pain, to represent the league, no matter what the cost. And Caitlin Clark became the symbol of that pressure. But now, she's become the symbol of something else. Permission. Permission to stop, to breathe, to say, I need help, and to have that be seen not as weakness, but strength. And the WNBA needed that wake-up call. This league is growing faster than ever. The attention, the money, the expectations, it's all snowballing. But growth without infrastructure, growth without care, that's a recipe for burnout. The press conference ended with Stephanie White placing her hand on Lexie's shoulder and simply saying, We've got your back, Caitlin. Always. And in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't about stats anymore, or standings, or even the playoffs. It was about a team redefining what support really looks like. The Fever aren't just growing on the court. They're growing emotionally, intentionally. They've built a culture where players look out for each other beyond the final buzzer, where vulnerability is strength, where leadership doesn't mean yelling. It means showing up when it matters. That's what Trees Leches represents. Not just 3 talented players, but a trio of women showing the entire sports world what real loyalty looks like. Sophie Cunningham might not have led the league in scoring, but she leads in love. Lexie Hull might not make headlines every game, but her quiet presence is the glue holding the team together. And Caitlin Clark? She's still a star. But now, she's also human and finally allowed to act like it. So where does the team go from here? For now, Caitlin will be scaling back. Fewer minutes. Some games off. A reset. Not a retirement. Not even close. Just a pause. And you know what? That's okay. Because when she comes back, she'll be stronger. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. Because now, she knows she doesn't have to carry the world alone. She's got Sophie. She's got Lexie. She's got a team that's got her back. And she's got a fan base that's learning to cheer not just for what she does, but for who she is. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed, if you've ever tried to keep smiling through the pain, if you've ever needed someone to tell you, it's okay to take care of yourself first, then maybe this story is for you too. Because this is how a league evolves. One moment of honesty at a time. If anything, this story is still unfolding. And what it's revealing about the Indiana Fever, about Caitlin Clark, about the entire WNBA, well, it's not just emotional. It's transformational. Because when's the last time a press conference shook the league? Not because someone was traded, not because a player retired, but because 3 women, Sophie Cunningham, Lexie Hull, and Stephanie White, stood up and told the truth. Not a PR-filtered, massage-for-headlines truth, but the real one. About pain, about exhaustion, about loyalty, about how far athletes are willing to push themselves before the world even notices they're hurting. That moment wasn't just about Caitlin Clark. It was about every player who's ever been told to put their body second and the brand first. Let's get into that. We love to talk about hustle, about playing through the pain. It's baked into sports culture. You get hurt, you wrap it up, you get back out there. That's what champions do, right? Except what happens when the hustle becomes the harm. Because make no mistake, Caitlin Clark didn't slow down because she wanted to. She slowed down because she had to. And she nearly didn't. She kept playing through a groin injury that every medical staffer probably begged her to rest. Why? Because she didn't want to let anyone down. Do you hear how twisted that is? That's not confidence. That's conditioning. That's the price of being the name everyone is watching. This wasn't just a physical injury. It was emotional wear and tear. Mentally, Clark was exhausted. You could see it in her body language during the last few games before the announcement. The spark wasn't gone, but it was flickering. The bounce in her step, the swagger in her passes, it was dimming. And still, she smiled. Still, she took questions. Still, she posed for photos with fans. Still, she showed up. Because that's what we ask of our stars. But maybe we need to start asking why. Why does she have to do all of that every single day without ever being allowed to admit she's tired? Why do we glorify the grind, but shame the pause? That's what this story is really digging into. And if we're smart, we won't just feel bad for Caitlin Clark. We'll learn from her. We'll listen to the silence between her answers. We'll recognize the bravery it took to say enough before something worse happened. And we'll start demanding better from the systems around our athletes. Now let's pivot for a second, because while everyone is focused on Caitlin, let's not sleep on what this moment revealed about Lexie Hull and Sophie Cunningham. Because those two, they are everything. Lexie Hull first. She's the definition of quiet strength. The kind of teammate who doesn't chase the spotlight, but somehow ends up holding the whole team together. When Lexie lost her dog, she didn't make a big scene. She didn't post 100 stories or ask for sympathy. She just carried it, quietly, while still showing up to practice, still grinding, still supporting her teammates. But Caitlin saw it, and that matters. Because even when she was breaking down herself, Caitlin showed up for Lexie. That's the kind of bond that doesn't just happen. That's not chemistry. That's love. So when it came time for Lexie to return that love, when Caitlin finally admitted she was hurting, you better believe Lexie was right there. Not just as a teammate, but as a sister. And Sophie? Oh, Sophie was built for moments like this. She's the fire, the protector, the emotional anchor with just enough chaos to keep everyone laughing even when the walls are closing in. It was Sophie who pulled Caitlin aside in that brutal road game a week before the announcement and said, "You need a rest. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now." She didn't say it as a coach. She said it as someone who's been there. Someone who knows what it's like to play through injury, to lie to yourself and everyone else until your body gives out. That's the kind of leadership that matters. Because leadership isn't just yelling from the bench. It's not pointing fingers in a film session. It's knowing when to pull someone aside and say, "I know you think this makes you strong, but it's okay to be soft here." That's Sophie Cunningham, the firecracker who keeps the team's heart beating, who clowns around during warm-ups, then locks in like a military commander at tip-off, who rides for her teammates like she's guarding the gates of heaven. When she got choked up during the press conference, it wasn't just about Clark's injury. It was about watching someone she loves suffer quietly. It was about realizing that even the strongest people need someone to check on them. And maybe, just maybe, we all need a Sophie in our lives. Now, here's the part of the story that isn't getting enough attention. Stephanie White didn't have to say what she said. The moment Caitlin Clark stepped back, the moment Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull flanked her with unwavering support, and the moment Stephanie White dropped the guard and told the truth, something shifted. In the locker room, in the fan base, in the culture. We're not just talking about a team anymore. We're talking about a statement. Let's talk about what this means for the Indiana Fever going forward. Because here's the plot twist nobody's talking about. This might be the best thing that's ever happened to them. I know. Sound crazy, right? You lose your star rookie. She pulls back from the spotlight. The team has to recalibrate mid-season. It sounds like a recipe for collapse. But what if it's not? What if this is the beginning of something better? When a team is built around a single player, even someone as magical as Caitlin Clark, it creates a gravitational pull. Everything orbits that star. The offense flows through her. The defense rotates around her. The media fixates on her. The pressure lands on her shoulders. But when that star takes a step back, suddenly, everyone else has to rise. And guess what? They can. Lexie Hull has been playing behind the curtain for far too long. She's efficient, she's focused, and she's got the kind of mental toughness you can't coach. With Caitlin sidelined, she's finally getting to run the offense through her decision-making. Not as a flashy scorer, but as a connector. The kind of player who does the work that doesn't show up in the highlight reels but wins games when it matters. You saw it instantly. The ball movement got sharper. The spacing improved. Suddenly, players were cutting off the ball, setting harder screens, and trusting each other again. Not because Caitlin was the problem, but because her absence forced everyone to stop waiting for her to save them. It's no secret that when Caitlin's on the floor, the default instinct is get her the ball. That's not a criticism, it's a fact. She's that player. But it also means others shrink back. They defer. They stopped taking initiative. Now, with Clark in recovery mode, the rest of the team has to learn how to breathe without her oxygen. And that, ironically, could make them stronger. Sophie Cunningham? She's not just the hype queen anymore. She stepped into the role of emotional captain. And I'm not talking about clapping hands and yelling, "Let's go." I mean real leadership, calling out lazy possessions, demanding accountability in huddles, calming down rookies who are second-guessing themselves, creating space for grief, for frustration, for the human side of sports. She's becoming the kind of vet people talk about years later. The kind that rookies say, "She changed how I saw the game." Because here's what most people don't realize. It's easy to lead when things are going well. When the star is healthy, the press is good, and the team is winning. But when the wheels start wobbling, that's when true leadership walks in or walks out. Sophie didn't flinch. When Clark told the team she was stepping back, Sophie didn't roll her eyes, didn't sigh, didn't say, "You're leaving us now?" She wrapped her arms around her and said, "We've got this." And then she turned around and proved it. She took over as the team's vocal engine. She kept practices tight. She protected her teammates in the media. She played with grit like every rebound was a message. Because it was the message, we're not built around one person. We're a team. We survive together. Stephanie White, for all the criticism she's taken lately, deserves credit here too. Because the easy thing to do would have been to pretend everything was fine, to say Clark's out for precautionary reasons and move on. But she didn't. She faced the cameras and owned it. And you know what that did? It gave everyone on the roster permission to stop pretending. Pretending they weren't exhausted. Pretending the pressure wasn't getting to them. Pretending they didn't miss their families, their routines, their lives before the spotlight. Once Stephanie said it out loud, "We've failed to protect our players," you could feel the release. Like a balloon finally untied. And it's not just the fever feeling it. You better believe locker rooms across the league were nodding along. Coaches whispering to assistants, "She's right." Players texting each other, "Finally, someone said it." This could spark a shift across the entire WNBA. Not just in how players are treated physically, but in how they're allowed to exist emotionally. Because that's what this has all been about, hasn't it? Emotional honesty. And that's why the fans have stayed loyal through the chaos. Because what they're watching feels real. You think people show up just to see Caitlin Clark shoot logo threes? Sure, that's part of it. But what's kept them coming is the authenticity. The feeling that these players care about each other. That this team isn't just chasing a ring, they're chasing growth. And now they're getting it. You're going to see a very different Fever team in the second half of the season. Not because they've added new players. Not because Caitlin's back. But because everyone else is stepping into their own light. Erica Wheeler is making smarter reads. Nalissa Smith is crashing the boards with purpose again. Christy Wallace is knocking down shots and finally being trusted in clutch moments. Even the rookies on the bench are showing signs of life. Why? Because they feel seen. Because the pressure to be perfect has been lifted. They're not waiting for Clark to carry them anymore. They're learning to carry themselves. And when Caitlin does return, because yes, she will, she's walking back into a different locker room. One that isn't dependent on her, but ready for her. Ready to integrate her brilliance into something more balanced. Imagine that. A fully rested, mentally reset Caitlin Clark. Walking into a locker room of confident, newly empowered teammates who have learned to lead without her. That's not just a comeback. That's a blueprint. Because if this moment teaches the league anything, it's that resting your star player doesn't have to mean losing your identity. It can mean finding it. So let's stop calling this a setback. Let's start calling it what it really is. A reckoning. A reset. A rise. And if you're watching this team closely, you know the energy is changing. The silence isn't defeat, it's focus. The tears in that press conference weren't about giving up. They were about letting go of the expectation to be unbreakable. They were about rebuilding something more sustainable, more honest, more real. So yeah, maybe the season isn't going exactly the way the Fever planned. But that's okay, because what they're building now, it's stronger than any stat sheet. When Caitlin Clark chose to step back, it wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a moment of control. A moment of reclaiming her narrative in a season that had started to spin beyond her reach. And as much as the headlines focused on her groin injury, the real story was far more personal. It was about boundaries. Caitlin didn't just make a medical decision. She made a human one. She looked at the nonstop schedule, the constant attention, the mounting pressure, and she finally said, "This isn't sustainable." And that's a lesson most athletes aren't allowed to learn until it's too late. We've seen too many careers burn out before their prime because no one gave players the space to say no. The marketing machine doesn't slow down for groin pain. The endorsements don't pause for mental exhaustion. But Caitlin Clark did what very few young stars have the courage to do. She drew a line. What makes it even more powerful is how she did it. Not with a press release full of fluff or a vague load management label. She did it through honesty, vulnerability, through the support of her teammates and her coach, who stood beside her and didn't let the narrative twist. Sophie Cunningham and Lexie weren't just supporting characters in this saga. They were pillars. The way they rallied around Caitlin in that press conference wasn't performative, it was protective. They didn't just echo the party line. They spoke from the heart. You could feel in their words, their body language, their silence. Lexie's quiet grief. Sophie's fierce loyalty. It reminded fans that this isn't just a team, it's a sisterhood. And that's rare. In professional sports, players are often reduced to stats and contracts. But in this moment, the Indiana Fever showed the world something deeper. A culture that values people before performance. That honors connection over clout. And that's why fans are staying. Not because of wins and losses, but because this team has soul. The Fever are becoming something bigger than basketball. They're showing other franchises how to build longevity, not just through talent acquisition, but through emotional investment. Caitlin Clark stepping back isn't the end of her rookie story. It's the middle, the plot twist that makes the payoff even better. Because when she returns, it'll be on her terms. Stronger, wiser, backed by teammates who proved that loyalty doesn't fade when the lights dim. And when that day comes, this team won't just play harder. They'll play for each other,